Yeah, okay. So a few of the things that you're going to be required to do in the assessment. The assessment is going to require that you implement arrays and loops in your code, right? So arrays and loops, they would essentially follow the same standards and practices that you would have learned in both Python last semester and computer programming if it's something that you'd have done already. I'd imagine you'd probably done it in computer programming already, right? So an array, let me go through this and I'll explain what I have here on screen in just a second. So let me pull up the folder for today. Or actually I can just do it in the browser. I'll do it in the browser first. Okay, so as we should know by now, a variable is just a container that we use to store some value. So you could have a value called num and set that equal to 10. You press enter, you call for num, and num stores 10, right? So we have a single variable that stores a single number, right? And we know that our variables can store different types of data. You can have a variable store an integer, a float, a string, or a boolean, yeah? But that's if you want to store a singular value in a variable. An array, just like in other programming languages, is a type of variable that allows you to store more than one values. So let's say, for instance, I want to store a list of names. So I say var and I say names equal to, and I'll open and close my square brackets. We use square brackets when we want to create an array. And the important thing is we're going to be listing off more than one value separated by commas inside of our square brackets. So I have my square brackets, and since this says names, it means I'm going to be writing off some names, and my names are going to be strings. So I'm going to create my double quotes, and I'm going to add a first name here. Then outside of my double quotes, I'll put a comma to separate that. That's the end of that name. Put another name here, say Jim, comma, John, and whatever other name I can think of, right? Press enter, and now I have my names. So if I type names here, it'll show me the current list of the names that I have that exist inside of my variable called names. So this, like I said, if I call on names, it shows all the names all at once inside the square brackets. But do you know what I would need to do if I wanted to just get a single name out of my array? Like let's say, for instance, I wanted to access the first name inside of the array. Do you know what I would have to do? Is this familiar to you guys, just to make sure? Arrays, like you do it in computer programming now, right? In C#? Yeah? So say I wanted to access this value, the first value inside of my array. Do we know about indices or indexes, where you put a square bracket next to it and then you specify some number? Press enter and it just gives me Philip. Or if I want the second one, I put square bracket 1, it gives me the second one. Square bracket 2, the third one, and square bracket 3, the fourth one. This is familiar? Stuff we'd have seen before, right? Hopefully. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm using the index of the element inside of the array. In programming, in most programming languages, we start off our indices or our indexes at 0. Meaning, in programming, we start counting from 0. So I have my array here. This 4 in brackets specifies that there are 4 elements inside of my array. And with there being 4 elements in my array, the first element will have an index of 0. So this one here that says Philip has an index of 0. You can think of an index as an address. Where in the list or where in the array does this value live? This value here that says Philip, it lives at index or position number 0. The second one exists at position number 1. The third one exists at position number 2, and the fourth one exists at position number 3. Yeah? And it would continue like that with as many elements or with as many elements that exist inside of your array. So what I was able to do, like I said, if I just called on names, it would show me the entire list. But if I wanted to get a particular value, from that list, I would need to reference it by its index. So if I wanted John, which is the third element inside my array, I would call on names 2. Yeah? So whatever value you want, if it's a third value you want, take 1 from 3 and then use that as the index, and that will give you the index for what you want, yes? If you wanted the 10th element, 10 minus 1 is 9, so I would say names square bracket 9. If I wanted the 100th element, it would be names square bracket 99. Make sense? Okay. Something else that I can do is, seeing as how at the moment for arrays we always specify an index by using a number, it does not mean that you have to specify, well, yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to specify the number itself. So like you don't always have to say 1 or 3 or whatever number is there. You could put that number in a variable. So I could say I, for example, is equal to 3. So say I equal 3, and now I can say names square bracket I, and that would give me this value here. And this works because I stores a value. That value is 3, so I'm asking the array to give me whatever value lives in the third index, or index number 3 inside the array. All right? I could change I to 1, and then when I call it again, it would give me Jim, because Jim is the second value inside my array, which means it lives at index number 1. All right? I can set I to be 0, and when I call names 0, I get Philip. Sorry, should have put names I and get Philip. Yes? All right, good. Questions so far? Are we okay with this? Is this fine? Yeah? All right. So that is an array. Is there anything else that I need to go over with arrays? Arrays don't only have to be strings. You can have an array of numbers. So let's say, for instance, you want to have an array of grades. I'm going to say var grades and set that equal to, and it could be a list of grades for students. It can be 99, 71, 60, 80. And I have a list of grades. So I could say grades, that would give me the full list of grades. Or if I wanted the first grade, I would say grades square bracket 0. If I want the last one, I'd say grades square bracket 3. And I'll give it the last one. Yeah? But let's say, for instance, I make a mistake and I ask for a grade that is outside of the range of my list. Meaning I try to make a request for a grade that has an index that isn't in this list. Like I put grades 4. If I put grades 4, if you notice looking at my grades list here, this is grade 0, this is 1, this is 2, 3, there is no 4. So that means if I press enter, I'm supposed to be getting an error, right? At the moment it says undefined, and I think it only says undefined because I'm doing this inside the console of my browser. If you were to try this in JavaScript itself, meaning you had it in your JavaScript file and you try to run it, more than likely you would be seeing some red text inside the console saying that you cannot get the value from this array because it exists outside of the range of the array. All right? So that'll be something that you can test when you're doing your practice. But yeah, so your arrays can be of any data type. They can be strings, they can be integers, they can be floats, booleans, or whatever. All right? If I'm not mistaken as well, in JavaScript, I don't think it matters what the data type of each individual element is. Meaning you could have an array that looks like this. So you could have var and you say list of things. And you could open and close your brackets. You could have the first thing being a string. You can have the second thing being a number. And you could have the third thing being a boolean. And I think that is legal. Let me see. List of things. Yeah, that seems to be legal. And I want the first thing, so it gets that. The second thing is that, yeah. So not everything has to have the same data type. That's not the case for other languages, if I'm not mistaken. So like, for example, you're doing C# now. If you're required to make an array in C#, if I'm not mistaken, you have to make sure that all the elements inside of your array conform to one data type. One data type that you choose. So if any one of the elements is a string, all of them have to be strings. If anything is an integer, they all have to be integers, and so on. Yeah? But JavaScript isn't as strict. So you can just use your list to store any values. Good? That clear? Okay. All right, so if arrays are clear, the next thing we need to look at before we can implement something like this is loops. You know what loops? Have you done loops? You've done loops before? All right, so I'm going to be showing you how we can use an array in a loop. One sec. So I'm going to say index.html. I'm going to create another file again, call it script.js, and I'm going to link my JS file. So remember, we always link our script file right before the body closes. So all of your content in your HTML must go above your script, always. Save this, and I'll write some JavaScript here. All right, let me see now. So let me create a list of names. So I'm going to say var names, and I'm going to say is visible, is equal to, I'll open and close my square brackets, and I'll say my first name is Philip, second name is John, third name is Mary. Yeah? So I have 3 names, and with a semicolon. Okay. Now what I want to, should I do that first? No, let me not do this first. I'll come back to this. I want to show you a simpler implementation of loops first. So I'll start off with a for loop. I think for the most part, for loops are going to be more important than while loops. I can't think of a scenario where you need to use a while loop. You guys have heard of for loops and while loops before, yes? Just making sure. Yes, I'm going to focus on for loops. So writing a for loop in JavaScript is pretty much exactly the same as you writing a for loop in C#. We start with the word for, and we'll open and close our parentheses or our brackets. And we start off by using, or we initialize our counting variable. So I'm going to say var I is equal to 0. So we're going to be using a variable called I to keep track of where in the loop we are. It starts off at position 0. Then we need to specify what condition needs to be met in order for our loop to successfully loop. I'm going to say, as long as I is less than 10, then I want my loop to iterate, or I want it to loop. And at the end of every loop, I'm going to say, I want I to increment by 1. So I'll go through what each one of these things means. I have 3 things in my loop. Oops. So I'm going to write a comment above it. I'm going to write for. So in your for loop, you need 3 things. The first thing is your initialization. Initialization. Sean, that's how it's spelled? Then you need a semicolon. Then you need a condition. Then you need an incremental. And I'll explain what each one of these things are. Initialization. Initialization. Okay, cool, yeah. So, the first thing, initialization. We are telling JavaScript that we want to start off at 0. This doesn't have to be 0. It can be any number you want. But for the most part, you may find that for your application, you're going to always want to start at 0. Again, it doesn't have to, but it depends on the situation. I'll explain what exactly it is you want to start off at 0 in just a second. But for now, just understand that you need the initialization, so you need to have a starting point. And then the second thing, which is your condition. Your condition is what needs to be true in order for this loop to actually loop. In this case, I say I want I to be less than 10. What that means is, for every loop, as long as I, this variable I, is less than 10, loop again. Yeah? So if there's a case where somewhere in your loop, the value of I changes, Before you loop again, check to see what I is. If it is less than 10, loop again. Then I will change again. If it's still less than 10, loop again. Up to the point where, for example, I may become equal to 10. If I becomes equal to 10, is 10 less than 10? It's not less than 10. That means stop looping. So, if at any point this condition is not true, if it becomes false, the for loop will end. And then you'll move on to the rest of the code. Good? And then this now, the last thing, the incremental, that is what is going to change the value of I at the end of every loop. Right? So this happens first, before the loop starts. And it only happens once. This happens at the end of, is it end? No, this happens at the beginning before a loop happens. This is a check to make sure that the loop must actually happen. If this is true, then you must loop. This happens at the end of every loop. Meaning, right before you check to see if you must loop again, do this. And this means add 1 to I. I++ means add 1 to I. You could also have subtract 1 from I. And that would look like this, I minus minus. But I have not really seen many cases where you would need to do that. So we'll stick to I++, which again means add 1 to I. So this happens once at the beginning of the loop before anything happens, just once. Then this happens before each loop. Every time the loop is supposed to happen, it checks if this condition is true. And if it is true, then the loop will loop. And then this happens at the end of each loop, right before it checks to see if it's supposed to loop. And this adds 1 to I. So let's see what this would do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simply print I. I'm just going to console.log the value of I. Right? So what this is going to do is, first, it is going to set the variable I to be equal to 0. And it's going to do that at the beginning, once. Then, it's going to look to see if it needs to loop. Question for you. Since it initialized I to be equal to 0, before it loops, is I less than 10? At this point, I is less than 10 because I is 0. So because I is 0, it will perform this action. Meaning it will just write this to the console. Write the value of I to the console, which is 0. So now there's no more lines for it to do. It will check to see if it needs to loop again. Or rather, no, sorry. Since there's no more lines for it to do, it will do this next. So it will add 1 to I. Now I is 1. Since I is 1, it's going to check this. Is I less than 10? Is it less than 10? Yes, because I is 1. Good, so since this is true, it will do this again. Now we'll console.log I. It will print I to the console. Then it's going to add 1 to I. Now I is 2. Is I less than 10? So it's going to print I, and it's going to add 1. I is now 3. Is I still less than 10? So it will print I again. And it's going to keep doing this over and over until it gets to 10, until I becomes equal to 10. When I becomes equal to 10, is I less than 10? No, because I is equal to 10. So, because I is equal to 10 and this is now false, this will not happen. It will end the loop and it will move on to whatever code is below it. Yeah? So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to save this and I'm going to run my console. Let me see. Does it actually just automatically run? No. Let me see. Do I need to refresh? Oh wait, wrong code. Let me run this. So if I'm not mistaken, it should just automatically start. Yep, there. So I open my console because this is where I expect to see it because I told it to console.log. And before I do anything at all, we notice that in the console we have a list of numbers from 0 up to 9, right? This makes sense? This look like what we expect to see? Do we know why it didn't print 10? It stopped at 9? Why do you think it stopped at 9? Why didn't it print 10? Not sure? So it stopped at 9 because in our code, if you remember, well, that's not exactly why. That's why it printed 0, but that's not why it stopped at 10. Or rather, stopped before 10. It stopped before 10 because of our condition. We said only perform what is in the body of the loop if I is less than 10. So since 10 is not less than 10, it will not print 10. Yeah? 9 is less than 10. So because 9 is less than 10, it will perform this action. Then it add 1 to I and give 10. When 10 is equal to 10, this is not true. So because this is not true, it does not do this action. So it stops right. It goes for as long as I is less than 10 in this case. Yeah? If you wanted it to print 10, we'd have to change this from 10 to 11. And then it would print the 10 because 10 is less than 11. Right? Make sense? Another way that we could get it to print the 10 is by changing this back to 10 and setting this to be less than or equal to. And then it would print the 10. Let me see. Refresh. Yep, and it prints a 10. And the reason for that is because for the entirety of the loop, when it starts at 0, 0 is less than or equal to 10. It is less than, so it's true. 1 is less than or equal to 10, all the way up to 9. 9 is less than or equal to 10. Then when it gets to 10, is 10 less than or equal to 10? Yes, because it is equal. So because this is still true, when 10 is less than or equal to 10, it prints the 10. But then it gets to 11, because this happens. Is 11 less than or equal to 10? No, it is greater than. So it is false. So it does not print 11, and it stops. Make sense? All right. So that is for loops in a nutshell. And let's see how for loops could become a bit more useful so when you're creating your applications. Okay, so now I can create my list of names. So I'm going to say var names is equal to, I'm going to have a few names. I'm just going to have 3. Okay, and I'm still going to start off the variable called I at 0, but I'm going to stop I not at 10, but at 3. And I'm stopping it at 3 specifically because I have 3 elements in my list. And what I'm going to do, instead of just printing I, I'm going to print names square bracket I. And let's take a look at this before I run it. So I have a variable called names, and I have 3 values in it: Philip, Jim, and John. 3 names. I told you that if you wanted to be able to access a particular element inside of your array, you need to use its index. So this value here has an index of 0. This has an index of 1, and this has an index of 2. I have a variable here called I that starts off at 0. So that means if I were to console.log names 0, or rather names I when I is 0, it should print Philip, right? After it prints Philip, then it's going to do this, I++. Now I is 1. Is 1 less than 3? Yes? 1 is less than 3. So it will print names I again. I is 1. So names 1 is Jim. Then it's going to say I++. Now I is 2. I'm going to print names I. I is 2. So it's going to print names 2, which is this, which is John. So it will print John. Then it will add 1 to I again. Now I is 3. Is 3 less than 3? No. So since 3 is not less than 3, this is false, and it will not do this. Instead, it will just end the loop and move on. So this should print the 3 names, one on top of the other, Philip, Jim, and John, in the console, specifically, because I specified in the console. So let's try it. There it is. Philip, Jim, and John. Yeah? Make sense? Okay. So this is useful for when you need to perform a certain action more than once. A singular action more than once. In my case, the action that I want to perform is I want to write something to the console. I could do this, or I could choose to write this 3 times. So I could instead, do something like this. I could say console.log names square bracket 0, duplicate it, changes to 1, changes to 2. Right? I could do this, and it would give me the same result. I refresh, and I get the same result, right? And yeah, that might seem simple because I'm just writing 1 line of code 3 times. But what if it's not just 1 line of code? What if it's 100 lines of code? What if it's a whole function I need to run? What if it's a whole process or a whole task list of things that I need to do more than once? I wouldn't want to sit down and write that out over and over. I mean, I could write it once and copy and paste, sure. Or I could automate it. I could write the task inside the body of my for loop, tell the for loop how many times I want it to run, and then just let it execute the task as many times as it's supposed to. That seems easier to me, right? One other thing I want to show as well. Sorry, not this. Okay. At the moment here, I have I less than 3. And I was telling you, if at some point you make a mistake and you were to try to access the index of an element in an array that is outside of the range of the array, you get an error. That means if I were to, for example, put 4 right here, so. If I put 4 here, first it would try to console.log names 0, because 0 is the first one. Then it would add add 1 to I. So it would print names 1. Then it would print names 2. Then it would print names 3. 0, 1, 2. You try to print names 3. At the moment, is there an element in my array that has an index of 3? Remember, this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. Is there a 3? No. So if I made an attempt to print name square bracket 3, we should get an error. Because I have 3 elements here, but just because I have 3 elements does not mean that I have an index of 3. It means my index starts at 0 and ends at 2. So let's try see what happens. And I get undefined. Yeah? So it was able to print the first 3, and I get undefined for the last one. Yeah? We don't want this. We don't want JavaScript to produce something that is undefined. Right? So one way to get around that, and I'll explain why this is important. When you're writing your JavaScript code, you may not always be in control of the list or the array that is in your code. What I mean by that is, have you guys ever done anything database related? No, you wouldn't have. Okay, no, I don't think you'd have done that yet. Maybe that's second semester, or second year rather. A database is just a collection of things. It's a storage program. You as the programmer don't always know how many things are in the database. So if you wrote some JavaScript that were to make a request to the database to say, give me everything that's in the database, all you know is that you are going to get back a list of things. You don't know how many things are going to be in there. So because you don't know how many things are going to be in there, you can't put a number here. It is not enough to just say, okay, maybe it's going to be 100, so I'll put 100. Because suppose it's 200 things. Then you'd have lost the second 100 of things, right? And then suppose it's only 10 things and you put 100 here. Then you're going to get 90 undefines. So you don't know how many things are going to be inside of the array. So a safer way to handle it is instead of putting a number here, what you should do is after you've gotten access to the array, ask the array how many things are in it by doing this. So the name of my array is names, so I'm going to say, let me create a variable here called num, or let me call it count, yeah, is equal to names dot length. right? So this line here allows me to get the number of things that is inside of my array. And this names.length should give me the number 3 in this case because I have 3 things in the array. So now, since I have that value, count, I could just put count here. So now I don't have to worry about accidentally going outside of the range of my array. And also I don't have to worry about cutting it off preemptively. This will always return the number of things in the array. So if there are 1 billion things in there, or 700 billion things, or 60 things, or 4 things, this line of code will return the number of things inside the array. So I can just use this value here and put it here. So as long as I is less than count, perform this action. Let me try it. And yeah, it looked like it worked. Yeah. If I were to increase the number of elements, so let me add some more. I won't make any other changes to the code. All I'll do is just add some more names to this, and I will not change the for loop. And you can see it already works. I didn't change the code, I only increased the number of things in the for loop, and it printed the 2 extra names that I put here. Because I didn't specifically specify, I did not explicitly specify how many times I want my for loop to run. I let it handle it programmatically or dynamically. The code detected how many elements were inside of my list called names, and then it told the for loop, run the loop, count times. Yeah? So this value here is going to be dependent on this value. And this value is dependent on how many things are in the array. Good? Make sense? Yes? Okay. I want to come out to the console now. I don't want to print anything to the console because that is not where the website lives. So to be very clear, if at any point you see a requirement that says you need to use a loop or do anything at all with JavaScript, it is okay for you to print values to the console, but if you only print values to the console, it is not correct. You have to print values to the console only if it is a case where you're doing debugging, you want to prove something to yourself to see if the value that you're expecting is the value that you get, but that won't count as the final deliverable. You should take that value and put it on the web page itself for it to count. What I mean by that is, let's say for instance I want to take that list of names and I want to actually put it on my web page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a, what can I put here? I'm going to put an empty div. I'm going to put a class called names. Right? So I have an empty div inside the body of my code. And I'll give it a, no, I shouldn't give it a class. I should give it an ID. And you'll see why. So I'm going to create a div, put in the body, and give that div an ID. I'll save this and go back to my JavaScript now. And what I'm going to do, instead of doing console.log, I'm going to take each name that I get from the array, and I'm going to insert it into the div. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to, outside of the array, since I only need this to happen once, I'm going to locate the div in my document. So I'm going to say var container. Let's call it name container. Name container is equal to document dot get element by ID. And the ID I'm trying to locate, or the element I'm trying to locate, is this div that has an ID of names. So I'll put names here. Just to confirm, I've showed you this before, right? You're familiar with this already? The document.getElement by ID. This is how we locate and store a particular element that exists in our HTML to be accessible and usable in our JavaScript. So I've searched my document for an element that has an ID of names, and I've stored that element inside name container. So that means this element here is stored inside of the variable called name container. So now I can manipulate that container, or that div. I can say name container dot inner HTML, and I can set it to be plus equal to names I. Oops, I. And if I save this, we're going to see all the names on the web page. But they're all joined up. We don't want it to look like this. We want to put some space in between them. So there are different ways that we can do this. I could potentially add a space to each name and make it look like this. That is one way of doing it. But let's say, for instance, I didn't want to do it this way. What if I wanted each name to be on a line by itself? Give me an example of an element that when you write them in your HTML, they always appear in a vertical stack on your web page. Give me some examples of block elements. What elements by default? Come again? Paragraph tags, the P tag, right? So that means instead of just writing the name alone inside the div, I could potentially put each element inside of a P tag. So let me show you how I would do that. I'm going to open and close my double quotes, and I'm going to create a P tag and then close my P tag /P, and I'm going to put names square bracket I here, right? When I run this, you're going to see that something's wrong. It didn't actually print each name individually. It did put them like stack in a vertical stack, but it literally wrote names square bracket I. That's not what I want. I want to get the value that is inside of name square bracket I. So what I need to do is I need to do this. I need to say, let me see. I'm going to change my double quotes. Change my double quotes to instead be backticks. This symbol here, a backtick. Look on your keyboard, and it is the one beside the number 1 on your keyboard. So look right to the left of number 1, you'll see the backtick right below the tilde. So I'm going to use that instead of my double quotes, and I'm also going to put a $ curly bracket, curly bracket. So what that means then, anything I put in between my $ curly brackets will not print literally. It will not print the exact value. It will print the value inside. We will treat it like a process or a variable. And instead of printing name square bracket I, it will print the value inside of name square bracket I. $ curly brackets only work if you use backticks instead of double quotes. If I change this to double quotes, then the whole thing is going to be treated like one long string. Meaning, it will just appear like this with the $ and the curly brackets. So $ curly brackets only works if you use backticks. Backticks. Save that. And now I have my names. Yeah? Another way I could do this, what if I wanted to put these in a list? Let's see how we could put this in a list. I'll use an unordered list. So instead of using a div, let me comment this out, and I will put an unordered list. So UL, and I have to give it an ID, name underscore list. No, name dash list. So name list. Just enter. And now I have an unordered list. So I'm going to be using this as my container. And I can keep this the same, name container, but the difference is my name container is no longer going to be identified by the ID names, because I changed the ID to be name list. So I'm going to change this to name dash list. So now name container stores my unordered list. Since I have an unordered list, what goes in between my unordered list? If I want to have some items listed inside of my unordered list. Remember what goes in an unordered list, please. Do we remember? When you have an unordered list, whether unordered or ordered, what do we put inside of our lists in HTML? You remember?
Remember like ordered lists.
But what tag?
What tag? UL.
No man, so that is UL. What do I put inside of a LI? Because a LI is a list item. So that means I'm going to have to change this from a P to LI. If I save this, I now have my list. If I wanted this to be an ordered list, I would have to go to my HTML and change this from a UL to an OL, my JavaScript stays exactly the same, and now I have an ordered list. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. So given that, let me see. You could potentially start off with doing this, but there is something else I want to show as well. Let me explain this though. Here, I have a list of cards, right? It would take a little bit for you to go in and create the CSS and fill in each value and then copy and paste and then change the values per, right? Another way of handling it would be for you to create a list of these items, and then all you'd have to do is take your for loop and feed the data into a single card, right? Because for the most part, all of the cards look the same. The only difference is the icon, this name, and this value, this population, right? So you'd have a list of 3 things. You could potentially use 3 different lists, but I'm going to be showing you a way where you can have all 3 things in one long list. And then you take that loop and you would, just like how I was able to take my values and feed them into a UL or an OL, you could potentially feed them into a card container that is already defined, and then you can just populate the web page and make it look like this. Yeah? Okay. So let me see if I can show you how to do that. Any questions before I move on? All right? Okay. All right, let me see. All right. So I mentioned that you could have a list like this, right? In my case here, I have only names in my list. But one thing that differs, that makes this different from what I showed on the web page, is that we don't only have one piece of information per card. We have 3 pieces of information. So it wouldn't be enough for me to just put Kingston in the list and then St. Andrew and then Portland and then St. Anne. Because I also need each icon and I need each population. These 3 pieces of information are relevant to this card. So I need a way to have 3 pieces of information as one element inside of the list. And for me to do that, I would need what is known as an object. When I say object, I may sometimes, instead of object, say, let me see, I may sometimes say JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, right? And a JavaScript object looks like this. So instead of having just names, I'm going to, instead of using square brackets, I'm going to use curly brackets. Wait, no, lie. I still need square brackets because it's still a list. So square brackets, and I'm going to press enter in between them for some space. So instead of just putting Philip here, I'm going to replace this with curly brackets. And the curly brackets means that this particular thing is an object. An object can store more than one item. So let's say the first thing is a name. I'm going to put name, and I'm going to put colon, and then I'll put the person's name. Then I'm going to put comma. I'll say age, colon, 20, comma, and then let me put favorite color, colon, blue. Right? So this is one object. This object consists of 3 items: a name, an age, and a color. Right? Each one of these things here written in white, that is a key or an attribute or a field. I'll probably call them keys or fields. And each field has a value, right? Each one of these keys and values are separated by a colon. So this name is Philip, this age is 20, and this color is blue. And then each pair of key and values are separated by a comma. So this is one key value pair, this is a key value pair, and this is a key value pair. Right? Yes? What this will allow me to do is have a list of objects. So this is the first element in my list. I can put a comma here, and I can have another element, another object. So let me just copy and paste this for simplicity. And I'll change this name to Jim, change this age to 30, and change this color to dark red. Put a comma here, paste this, change this name to Joe. Joe is 19, favorite color is green. And I'll put one more. The name is Jan, the age is 34, and favorite color is gold. Right? So I have 3 objects now. I have a list of objects. And the same way how I was able to use my index to get each value from my list of names, I could still use an index again to get each value in my list. The difference is, if I were to say names, square bracket 0, it would not just give me the name. It would give me the whole thing, the whole object. So let's see what that would look like. So this is my names. And here, instead of printing names, wait, actually, hold on. Yeah. So I'm just going to have this. The only change I made is to my list. I'll keep all the rest of my code the same. And we'll see that my code, oh, all right. So one issue is you can't just print an object and put it on a web page. Instead, it will show like this. That's not what we want. But let me put it in the console so that you can see it. So instead of putting it on the web page, I will do a console.log. So console.log, and I'll do names, square bracket, I. Save this, and I'll look in the console to see what prints. And it prints the objects. Yeah? So each one has been printed, and it shows object up here, and it shows the field or the key inside the objects. I have age is 20, color is blue, name is Philip. And I have age is 30, color dark red, name Jim, and so on, right? And it printed it for as many objects as there are in my list. So if I wanted to get this information on the web page now, I wouldn't want to print the object directly, because as you could see, when you try to put an object on an HTML page, instead of it actually printing the data, it just prints object, which is a problem. So here's how we're going to get the data to show as we expect it to. I'm going to need to break the data out one by one in my JavaScript code. So instead of saying names square bracket I, we know that name square bracket I gives us an entire object. So what I need to do is I need to also, in addition to specifying the index, that being the position in the list that the element is going to be, I also want to put another pair of square brackets and put what part of the object do I want. So I'm going to specify that I want the name, right? So if I save this, then it prints all the values. If I wanted not the name but the ages, I would put age here. Save that, and I have all the ages. If I didn't want the age and I wanted the color, I'll put color here. Yeah? So what that means is, let me get an example of an object. I'll copy this one and put it in the console. If I have var obj is equal to this, and I want the name from this object, I would say obj square bracket name, and that'll give me the name. If I wanted the age, I'd get the age like that. If I wanted the color, I get the color like that. So when you have an object or a JSON, if you want to get a value from the object, you don't use its index, you use its name, or you get its key name. The fact that this says name here is coincidental. We use keys to get the values from our object. We don't use index. We use index when we're listing out the values in an array, but we use their keys when we're getting values out of an object, right? So that is why I was able to do something like this, where I was able to specify that I wanted, from my list of names, I wanted the index that has a value of whatever I is. And in addition to that, because this part here only gives me the object, and then this part here specifies what part of the object I want. So that means I could also do something like this. I could specify, let's write this. So let's put name here, name, and I can say is, I'll copy this. Age, years old, and their favorite color is color. And I will have a paragraph or a list of statements about each person in my list. Philip is 20 years old and their favorite, I spelled there wrong, their favorite color is blue. There. Did I spell it wrong again? E-I. Yeah. Yeah. So I use my JavaScript to get the values out of the objects and then fill in this sentence. Make sense? Yes. I hope it makes sense. All right. So that means then I should be able to, instead of using a list, I should be able to make a very simple card and fill this data into the card. And then take that card and put it on the web page. Yeah? Can I leave that to you guys? Can I have you guys do that part? So I have a list on screen, but instead I want it to look something similar to this instead. It is not to say that you're going to have to do up all of the perfect fancy styling. I just want to see individual boxes. So I want you to put a box on screen, give it a border, for example, maybe a red border or a blue border, whatever border you want. Actually, no, don't do that. Yeah, just put a box with a border, and inside, give me like an H1 with the person's name and 2 paragraph tags for their age and favorite color. Yeah. So the list can look like this, and then you just use a loop to populate your page. So each one of these objects should go in a box by itself. So let's try that. If you need to see any more of my code, and in the meantime, I'm going to pause the recording. All right. So what I was saying is, instead of putting it in an li, what you do is you write some CSS. So let me create some CSS. Style.css. I'll link my CSS. And I'm going to write some style for, I'll use an example that I saw from a classmate. I'll put box. So any element that has a class of box, I want it to be height 100 px, width, Give it a width of 100 px. Let's give it a border of 3 px. Solid blue. And let's give it a margin of 10 px. Don't want to do anything else to it. No, that's fine. Okay, so I've written some CSS for my box. So now what I need to do in my JavaScript is I need to put each one of my elements that I'm writing to the document in a box. So instead of having li here, I'm going to put div and give it a class of box. And then go to the end and change it from li to div. Also, another thing you're going to want to do, assuming you wrote what I wrote, you're not going to want to put this in an OL. You don't want to put this in a div as well. So the div is your main container, and you make sure that the thing that you're writing to the container is of class box, since that's what your style sheet says it's supposed to be. So I should have this. Yeah? So now each one is in a box for itself. Yeah? Let's put some padding on them. Close that. And then any other style you'd want to put on it, you could do is in your style sheet. So if I wanted to make sure that my boxes were in a row instead of a column, I'd have to make sure that the name list is a flex box. So I could say name list dot name list display flex. That didn't work. Why did it not work? Hold on. Name list. Name list. So name list is supposed to be a flex box. Let's see why that didn't work. Interesting. Why is name list not a flex box? Did I spell that wrong? You're right. Wait. Oh, it's true because it's an ID. You're right. Thank you. Hashtag. Excellent. You are correct. Cool. So next thing is you will notice on my page that I have here, you will see that each one of my boxes not only have this custom information for each card, but also a button. And at the moment, the behavior of my button is if I click on the button for St. Andrew, it will add St. Andrew to my list of trip locations. If I click add trips for Trelawney, it will add it to Trelawney. St. Elizabeth, it will do the same thing, right? So each one of these buttons, they effectively do the same thing. It just takes whatever name is in the card and it puts it in this list down here, right? We can use JavaScript to do that. We can make it so that each button knows its own context, right? So that if you click on this, it will add Portland. If you click on this, it will add Trelawney. If you click on this, it will add St. James, right? And the way we can do that is by specifying what's supposed to happen when you click on the button. But I'm going to be doing it a different way from the way I showed you originally. The way I showed it originally is where you go into your JavaScript and you locate the button in your HTML and then you add event listener on the button, right? But for a context like this, adding the event listener is going to be a little bit more I don't know if it's even possible, to be honest. I'm going to say it's problematic, but I'm not sure if it's even possible to do it that way. So I'm going to be showing you another way that you can specify what's supposed to happen when you click on a button. So I'm going to create another button. This is going to be a placeholder button for now. Let me put above the name list. So I'm going to say input of type button, and I'm going to give it a onClick, right? So this button here has an attribute called onClick. And what that means is when you click the button, perform this action. So let me specify an action that's supposed to take place. Let me write a function. I'm going to write a function here in my JavaScript, and I'm just going to call it function. I'm going to call it test function. And that function is supposed, wait, function test, why is it complaining? And that function is just going to console.log some text to my console. This is a test. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference this function in the HTML. I'm going to say when this button is clicked, I want it to trigger the test function. All right. I need to give it a value as well. So value is equal to click me. All right, let's take a look at what this looks like on my web page. So I have a button that says click me. When I click it, it's supposed to trigger my test function. Let me open my console. So when I click it, it's supposed to say this is a test. Click it again, it says this is a test. At the moment, you will not see it continuously add this is a test to the console, because whenever you're trying to print a string that is exactly the same, it will just put a counter beside it. So if I click it again, it's just going to put 9 to say that it just printed it 9 times. If I click it again, it's 10 or 11 or whatever. Yeah? Why is it lagging? That's weird, but yeah. So I was able to add a function to my button to say when it is clicked, do that thing. Yeah? So this is the function that it's supposed to run whenever you click it. And if I wanted to, I could pass in some value. So I could say, let me do this twice. So let me do 3. So click me 1, click me 2, and click me 3. And if I want, I could make it so that my function takes some parameter. So I could make it take a number. Is that how you do that? No, I guess you don't. So my function takes some parameter. In this case, it takes a number. And I'm going to change my value to say this is button number. I'm going to put number here. $, curly bracket, number, change this to backticks. All right? So now what it's going to do is it's going to print a string that says this is button number, and it's going to print the actual number that you pass into it. So this number is going to be this number. So what I'll do in my JavaScript, sorry, my HTML, I'll pass a value here. I'll put 1 here, put 2 here, put 3 here. When I save that, what's going to happen is, depending on which button I click, it will print a different statement. So if I click the middle one, it'll say this is button number 2. Let me clear this. So this is button number 2, this is button number 3, and this is button number 1. Button number 2, button number 1, button number 3. Yeah? So we see how it prints a different value depending on which button I click. Yeah? So let's do this programmatically. Let's do this in JavaScript. Don't need these anymore. All right. So let me create a test function, or I'll just keep this test function. I'm going to change it from number to name. I'm going to say this user's name is name. So I'm going to have a function that passes in a name. So in my box that I'm writing to the web page, I'm going to create a button. I'll just copy this button from here since I have the logic for it already, or the HTML rather, and I'll just put it at the inside the list. So, you know what? Let me break it up. I'm going to put this here. Put this down here so it looks more like HTML. So let me see. Yeah. And then I'll put the button here. So it says button input value, click me. I'll just put this here. Or let me say add name. And it calls test function. And instead of putting 1 here, I'm going to put the name, which is this. Say this, and now my boxes should have names. Where are the names? That didn't work. Hold on. Oh dear, why didn't that work? Let me see. Is there any issue with my code? It says blah blah blah. Oh, that's a favicon. Alright, hold on, let me see if I can figure out why this didn't work. Oh, you know what, maybe it's the multiple lines. This thing doesn't like multi-line. JS multi-line string with, I don't know. Oh, it does work. So why doesn't it like my multi-line string? It preserves white space exactly as written in the code. Where is my button? Cut this. Take it out of the div. And let me put it below the div. I understand this. Alright, let's see if we can figure out why it's not working. Input. Oh, my closing is gone. Is that why? Is that what you're going to say?
No, you don't have the quotations in the box.
True. It's not supposed to die. Wait. No, I lied. That is supposed to go there.
The brackets where test function is, put it in the bracket. Yeah. And that works with me.
Oh. Wait, what? Really?
Yeah.
Putting, oh, wait, that's true. Wait, no, what? Oh, yeah, true. I need to put double quotes here, because it's a string. That does make sense. Yeah. Good Lord. Okay, this is broken, huh? Is it?
And a double string
You put single quote?
Yeah.
I don't think it matters, but still. I mean, it worked for me, but it, what? What? I need double quotes? Single quotes don't work. Why doesn't single quotes work? That is interesting. Okay, it kind of worked, but for some reason my buttons are huge. Oh, it's because it's inside of the... All right, I need to put it inside the div. Let's put it in the div. And move this from here to here. There we go. Why is there a semicolon there? This goes here. All right, can I clean this up to make it more readable? So let's make it look like that. So it looks more like a div, some text in it. All right, and the button doesn't fit inside the box, but that's okay. You can use your styling to fix that. So let me open back my console, and if I had to click on any of these names, this should type, wait, why that break? Unexpected end of input. Okay. Should there be a double quotes here? Jeez. Oh no. All right, let's see. I think single quote should go here, you know. Yeah, that worked. Okay, single quotes. Right, okay, so this part's a little bit confusing because you have to make sure that your quotes are in order, your quotes match up. But I was able to put an input inside of the div, an input of type button. And for the onclick, I surrounded the test function called in double quotes, and then name was surrounded by single quotes. Make sure to have double quotes and single quotes in the correct places when you're doing this. You can do it the way I did it, if it helps. So every time the button is clicked, it triggers the test function. Test function is a function that takes a name, and all it does is it writes a value to the console. So I click on this, it should write Philip, yeah. Let me zoom in. If I write this, it should write Joe, and so on. Yeah. All right, so I'll leave this code here, and what I want you to do is I want you to mimic the behavior of the web page, where in this case, whenever I click on the button, I can do this later, it should add the country that you click on, the country whose button you click on, to this list. So instead of writing it to the console, you append it to your trip list. So try that for me. And I will give you access to my code. So my code is here. Now, so try that. Let me pause this. Yeah, okay, like I was saying, I added this block of code here. This window.onload will make it so that any function that it is set equal to will run as soon as the page is refreshed. So the first thing I did is I created a prompt that asks the user to enter their name. It greets them and asks them to enter their name, and it stores whatever they're typing in into a variable called name. Yeah? Then in my HTML, I would have created an empty h1 that has an ID of name, and I use my JavaScript to locate that name. And then once I've located that name, I'm able to set the inner HTML of that value so that I can insert a message into that h1. In this case, I specify that I want to put welcome back and then the person's name, just like this. So this block of code here will run every time the page refreshes, and it will look like this. Just like that. So let's try that.